I just wanted to introduce myself. So I will be taking over the Cert IV Community Services class with you while Helen is moving into another group. So I'm not sure whereabouts you are in your own enrolment. So whether you're close to the end or whether you're just beginning. So some of you I may have quite a bit more work with, and others may be just a brief supporting you to finalise your program, which will be wonderful for you. A little bit about me. I come from a health industry background, so registered nurse, midwife, child and family nurse, and have also been working in the training space for over 15 years. So I have got a bit of diverse experience working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities in southwest Sydney, as well as Western Sydney, and with vulnerable migrant communities as well there. Currently, I'm on Biripi land, which is in Port Macquarie. So we have moved to the Mid-North Coast and working with community services and maternity services and aged care on the coast. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. Have been teaching health units as well as community services units for quite some time. So have been working on this program and do have some experience with it, but am fairly new, 8 weeks maybe now, to HADA. So new to a few of their systems. So when I say, let me check, it's because one, it's HADA and it's new, and two, I'm not, well, I wouldn't say I'm completely a dud with technology, but I wouldn't say I'm right up there either. So you'll find that sometimes it may look like I'm fumbling. Possibly I am. And the reason for my wild temperatures and my coughing tonight is I've just had COVID. So the benefits of online training means that I can still keep training. So if I absolutely lose it with my throat, we'll have a shorter session and I'll record the rest when I can speak and send that out for you. All right, so let me get a little bit of an idea about who's in the room. So Kylie, you talked about working already in community services. So what kind of industry context are you in?
I am a housing officer with Mission Australia Housing. I have been in community services. I'm going into 7 years. Prior to that, I was a mainstream real estate property manager for 20 years.
That's excellent. Some experience there. Anyone else like to share their backgrounds, or if they're working in industry, or if they have identified a work context that they'd like to move into?
Hello, Donna. Hello.
Hi.
Hello. So yeah, my name's Carl. It's not Carlson, by the way, it's Carl. I actually can't change my name actually on Zoom. I used to change it every week, then it's stuck. And I just don't know how to change it. And I work in technology, so I've stuck with Carlson. I can't like it. I currently work for Optus. I'm a sales director for contact center. So completely different sea change that I'm looking for over the next 2 or 3 years. I don't know how I'm going to do it yet, but that's my plan. And I think I'd like to go into youth mental health and grief counselling. So that's the area I'm moving towards at the moment. I think DV is too vicious and too troubling. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking at the moment. So just looking to what the next course I'm going to do after this one.
Excellent.
So there you go. Me.
Thank you. Anyone else like to share?
I work in the public health industry. I'm in dental at the moment, so that kind of with the patients that we see. So we have a lot that are like to be eligible to be seen are homeless, need their pension card and all those kinds of things. So I think seeing those kinds of people kind of got me thinking, and I always kind of wondered, oh, how did they get to be where they are now, kind of thing. And so I thought this course would be really good for me and to learn a lot and then decide what I'd like to go into, because I've been doing that for 14 years now. So I'm ready to try something new.
A little bit of a change. Nice.
Yep.
Excellent. How about you, Tony?
Hi, how are you, Donna?
I'm good.
Yeah, I've been involved as a soccer coach now for 9 years. For 4 years, I was actually part of FIFA Welfare Soccer. And only a couple of days ago, I was approached by Big Issue. Big Issue, they've got a lot of other. It's not only the magazine. And they get involved in a program called Street Soccer, which is very big in Victoria. Last year wasn't that big, so this year I was only approached a couple of days ago, and I'm thinking about it. Well, I've been involved with kids, and that's where I want to concentrate on young people at the risk and the refugees.
Nice. Carl, you had a question? Oh, clap. Sorry, I thought it was turned on.
He's our class clown, you know, he's a good man. He's a good man. I think Sally Bush is having trouble getting in.
Yeah, she can't get a camera on. That's okay. She can hear us.
Yeah.
I just nodded and realised you can't see me, so.
All right. Is it Diana? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking at career changes. Recently medically retired paramedic, so that's just looking at diversifying a little bit.
Yeah. Have you got a bit of an idea what kind of area sector you might be interested in, or not sure yet?
Not 100% certain yet.
It's a bit like you, Abby. There's just so much to actually consider, isn't there? When you've had a bit of exposure, actually knowing where to go can be a bit tricky. How about you, Sally?
I've been with Bunnings for 22 years, so I am looking for a change in careers. What sector I want to go into, I have no idea. I have applied for multiple positions. It seems to be most of them, though, are with youth work or youth justice, so maybe that's my calling. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. And I'm not sure if...
Lynn.
Yeah.
Probably me, yeah. Hi, Donna.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Tony. Hi, everyone. My name's Lynn. Probably on the screen is some other name. My real name, but my preferred name is Lynn, so you can call me Lynn if it's easier. So, yeah, I've been working in finance industry for the last 23 years. I'm currently a finance manager in one of the private golf courses in Sydney, and I'm just don't want to deal with number anymore. And I'm thinking that probably dealing with people is not easier, but more fun. Yeah, and also my daughter is going to do psychology course, so she's in year 12 at the moment, so she really wants to be a psychologist. So yeah, so I really want to do something different, change career. Probably from next year I want to do something with the community, so that's why I decided to take this community course. And yeah,
very nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too, Donna.
So that gives me a bit of an understanding of backgrounds and maybe interests as we go through. I would like, as I go through, to try and link it to the topics a little bit. So the more you're able to kind of think, you know, what direction you'll go into, the more the actual topics will come alive for you. So it's just something that helps me. All right, so let me pop up our session. Okay. Pardon me. Now, for some reason, when I was looking at the Accelerate information, it wasn't actually giving me a timetable. It was only just giving me this one unit. So I'm not even sure how many sessions this unit will have for us. So I'll check that when I finish and see if someone can provide me a timetable, so I've got a little bit more of an idea of our direction. Okay, would anyone like to read the acknowledgement to country?
Abby is very good.
Abby, would you like to do it?
I can do this, yep. Thanks, Tony.
You're welcome.
In the spirit of reconciliation, Hayter Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live and study. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal, spiritual and cultural costs of that sharing, and hope that we may move forward together in harmony and in the spirit of healing. We pay our respect to all First Nation people and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging.
Thank you, Abby. And I will ask that you really do contribute today, because my voice is not going to last through our whole session. And my computer won't even move either. Just as a reminder, the trigger warnings for our unit recordings are going out. If you're sharing stories, personal stories, be mindful that it may be something that others find difficult to hear. The topic tonight is also going to be something that may be triggering for some people, some memories or some events for them. So we need to think about how we communicate, how we speak, and the messages that we're providing to others. Okay, so we're having a look tonight at custodians of the land, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders living in Australia before colonisation, the diversity in our culture, the meaning of land, kinship, spirituality, and the dreaming. So we're just having a little bit of a reflection and a look at, I think there's about 4 videos. We won't play them all, and we may not even get to the last one because it's 10 minutes long, but we'll see how we go. We are all visitors to this time, this place. We are just passing through. Our purpose here is to observe, to learn, to grow, to love, and then we return home. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree.
It's a beautiful thought, isn't it, really?
I agree.
So if we all consider ourselves visitors, sometimes we can think about our place in this world a little bit more from a gentler perspective, a more respectful perspective. So it can be an interesting kind of concept. So just a little bit about language and terminology. So Indigenous, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander are some of the preferred words that we're going to use. Just as also a point, this PowerPoint was written and developed by a previous trainer, Tammy, who actually was a Wiradjuri woman. So some of the slides will refer to our speaking as if from her point of view. So just as a kind of point as we're going through. And just to understand that the abbreviation ATSI, which some of us who have been working for some time in different areas may have heard referred to before, and there used to be ATSI programs and things like that. It is not an abbreviation that is correct, and we shouldn't be using it anymore. So I'm not sure why, Kylie. You might have to have a quick look at your settings.
I can hear you fine, Donna. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, me too. Kylie's good now.
Good now?
That wasn't me, Tony. That's the other Kylie. That's a South
the other
Australian.
Kylie. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
We'll just keep moving. Oh, she's come out and come back in. Okay, and the word Aborigines is also not terminology that we would be using. It's disrespectful. What you will notice here, First Nations isn't written. So I don't know how long ago Tammy developed this PowerPoint, and whether from her point of view, First Nations isn't a term that she prefers. So saying that, what should we do if we're unsure?
Well, nowadays, it's much preferred to call them First Nation people, which is what they are, than Indigenous or Aboriginal. That's a bit less sensitive.
You could ask them maybe as
Yeah,
well.
just ask them.
Yeah,
I work with an Indigenous woman, and she refers to their community as First Nations or herself, or so it's it can be a bit confusing, I suppose, to know what one person prefers than the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's exactly it, isn't it? We can't stereotype a whole group of people. It literally is, can I just respectfully ask what your preference is, so that I'm referring to you correctly, rather than being at risk of making you feel uncomfortable. This is going to get fun. I can't turn things on and off. So we're going to look at custodians of the land, and the fact that what the meaning behind that term, where we're just looking after the land and not owning, but being there to ensure that it's continuing, that it's healthy, that it's living on, and that you're passing it down to the next generation. So there's a real thought process of that pathway and continuation that we need to remember. It's really important. I'm unsure about anyone else, but I will just say that history is not my strong suit. And when we're looking at Australian history, for those older people in the group, we would not have had a huge amount of history about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in school. So a lot of the actual history that we're learning now is more recent for us. So when we're talking about what's happening, we need to really dig deep into the history of what's going on, because history is written by the colonisers. So we need to understand, and that's in any country that has had that happen. So when we think about Australia, and before 1788, there was a long history there prior, and that's not well known, like the length of it, because it's not written history. we're looking at those stories that have been passed down, the cave paintings and the etchings. So really rich information when we can find it. But really we're only learning about it more recently, which I think is a real shame. And if you're looking for more information, one of the websites is Creative Spirits, and that will give you a little bit more information as you work through, just because what you will find is in one of your assessments, there's quite a bit of research and asking you to look at some of this history and information and doing a little bit of a look through. So before colonisation, again, when we're thinking about economies and the way people live, it was more that hunting and gathering kind of lifestyle. So the bargaining or the way that the different groups would work together would be very different to what we would understand. And when you think about the tools that they're making and what they're using them for, it is amazing that we're not finding more implements, but they certainly are finding bits and pieces as we go through. And if I talk about diversity of culture, what do you think? What aspects of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture would you say indicate diversity?
I would say it's the way they do things, so from their history, what they're bringing forward into the culture today.
Mm-hmm. So when we, like, you know, in that generalised kind of what is diversity kind of response, and we say background and life experience and upbringing and religion, like that whole bundle is very, very different, isn't it, historically?
Absolutely.
Any other aspects of diversity that you would say that was part of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander?
Well, they lived with the land. So if you're gonna live with the land, you once you become a farmer or industrial, you live on the land. But if you're living with the land, you've got to be diverse because that's what the land is. You're on the move. You don't stay one spot and dig out everything. You're always moving. You're always challenging. You're always learning. You don't pick a spot and say, let's kill this spot until there's nothing left.
Yeah, yeah. And there was a mix of that, wasn't there? So there was spots where they would be staying for periods of time and then moving on or continually moving. So even that diversity is present. What about where people lived?
Well, you wouldn't build a stone house if you keep moving, will you? But
No.
hard to take a stone house with you. So you'll just, I'd have, like you're native Indian, then you'll have a TP. If you're a native Australian, you'll have a humpy, which you can make in half an hour. Well, not me, but nature.
Yeah, yeah. What else about the geography of where they live? Anything else that you would say?
But the bit I've studied about it and I've been privileged, I've met some excellent First Nation people, especially one of them. And by the little, they lived in separate places according to the stage of the year. Like when, at what seasons they will live in the wetlands. You know, they keep moving. they follow the universal pattern, which is something that we do the opposite. We expect the universal pattern to follow us. So total different.
And they weren't.
I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Tony. They weren't just one group either, were they? Like, so they were a very, very large, diverse group with their own patterns, way of living, language, and culture and stories. So the fact is that, you know, we're not stereotyping just one, you know, when we say Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, the diversity within that group is quite huge as well, isn't it? So we need to bear that in mind. There's a lot of diversity within that a group of people there. So looking at the map, does anyone know the number of language groups that they have identified?
Yeah, it says on my screen.
Can you see it? Can you?
It says there 350.
Oh, cheating.
I'm just reading.
I've got the wrong one up. You shouldn't be able to see it. Yeah, so 350. It's quite large, isn't it?
Yep.
It's amazing.
No, most of us have trouble speaking English.
Unless we've come from another country, and then you're probably either bilingual or multilingual. Yeah, we're not very good at picking up lots of languages. Can anyone quickly Google for me and tell me how many languages are actually active or in use?
$500. Made that up. I didn't Google it. Didn't Google it.
Well, why?
Yeah. I was confident though.
You were, and that's the trick.
Yeah. Ah, it's 500.
Close. It says 400.
Ah.
Well, it says Australians speak over 400 languages. Of these, 167 are actively spoken Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander languages.
So 167.
Yeah, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, yeah.
So they've lost that many.
How many did you say?
400, over 400, and 167 of them are the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander languages.
That's the problem with Google and Microsoft. What I've got on me is in 2021, when the last survey on language was taken, there were over 150 actively spoken Aboriginal languages in Australia. However, it's important to note that only 14 of these languages were spoken fluent in everyday life. So my one tells me 150.
So did anyone have an opportunity recently to hear any news or information about a project that's happening in the Northern Territory with languages? There's a literacy program and they're supporting communities to actually, I think it's a song. They're trying to learn to sing a song, but they're also writing a book in their language. And it's a big, it's a charity, and then they're moving around to different communities and making sure that the languages are being protected. So it's a really good initiative. So you might hear a little bit about that, but it might be worth having a little bit of a read about if you can find some information.
Donna, I'm here in Far North Queensland. I live in Kuranda, and we're on Jabbergai land here. And the Jabbergai people actually have on a language class. So for anybody that wants to come along and the language, and they've only just recently, tonight I saw it on Facebook, they've put a book together as well. So for everybody to learn the language, but even in the local paper, they have like a quarter page, and they'll go through different words and the breakdown for the language.
Yeah. It's just really encouraging to see that there are more efforts to really try and make sure that we're not losing more of those languages, and really trying to teach people, not just Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, but everyone, some of that language. It's really, really nice. Okay. So just breaking down a little bit more, then you've got got New South Wales. And you can see, I don't know if you can see, it's a bit small, where I am in Port Macquarie. So you'll notice my spelling is different to what's on this map, which is also something that you do see a little bit. One of the activities that we'll do in a second, is actually Googling the local lands council and looking for your land, and often there are differences in spelling, so it can be a little bit challenging to know which is correct. So it's something that we need to, again, if you're working with people and with land councils, it's important to check the correct spelling, the accepted spelling for the local area. And then when you look at the geography of it, it just shows you a little bit about where those different groups were living and moving. And so you can see it's quite diverse groups, which is really important to understand. And for those of you who are in Victoria, I've got a little bit of a look at Victoria. Okay. And so moving on to looking at some of that diversity. So 600 different clan groups, that's an estimation. Information and groups have been lost, obviously, with what happened during colonisation. So some of our records are a little bit inaccurate. We're looking at groups and clans that have their own skills, because it would depend on also how they live and where they live, their different stories, their dreaming tracks, language. Obviously, when we're looking at 350 languages, that's quite a significant diverse group. Those traditions and kinship structures and the cultural expectations, which are very much laid out and taught through that oral history. Okay, so here's your group activity. You don't have to go to a breakout room. I'll just stop the recording though. Excellent. So if you can, if it works for you, excellent. It's always good practice to know what land you're on, and yeah, if you're emailing or mailing anything these days, the post office is actually quite positive and encourages you to actually write the land that you're posting to as well, which I think is very nice. Okay, so remembering that we're trying to keep our memories alive of the history and the cultural heritage by that oral history, but also by the knowledge and the artwork that has been completed in different variations in the cave drawings, as well as other bits and pieces that we have found. and the rituals and performances that have been passed along. And so that's also another thing that we're seeing a little bit more of. Can anyone remember or share the last time they may have actually seen Aboriginal dancing being performed?
Last week,
The state of origin.
Yeah, so last week was State of Origin, so a few people saw that one.
We had a day for Reconciliation Week last week, and a couple of quite a few of our colleagues are either Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, so they came in their cultural dress, and we had cultural food, cultural activities, dance, singing, lots of things. It was a beautiful day.
And it definitely is something that I'm not saying recent, but we're certainly seeing it far more than, say, when I was a child at school. You know, the 50s, 60s, 70s, certainly that kind of day would not have been very common, would it?
No.
So I think as a country we're recognizing a bit more that history, and we're really much more aware that it is part of the history of Australia, and how can we actually incorporate it into everyday life, really, which is, when you look at State of Origin, it is becoming much more part of the events that we have.
Donna, by the way, this stuff blows me away. I went over the weekend, this weekend. I sort of went ahead a bit and did 2 or 3 of the modules, the assessments, and I knew nothing, by the way. I didn't know the difference between acknowledgement of country and welcome to country. Didn't know the difference. Just like, how ignorant can I be? But then you ask the questions of the kids at school, and I've got 2 bright kids, but they're not taught anything. They've been going to school here for 8 years. It's amazing how little is actually taught about anything, and I've been in presentations when someone's popped up and we're going to do welcome to country, and it's like, well, are you, knowing what I know now, are you going to do that? Is that what you really think you're going to do? But you look at things like the national days and the significant days, etc. Are there any public holidays for First Nation people? And they've got whatever 10, 12 days of important, significant dates, but I don't think there's a public holiday for any of those. It's just genuinely weird. It's genuinely weird. What goes on, what's gone on, and the more you read into it, and I read the 70-page guide over the weekend, I just thought I'd dip in, and then I read all 70 pages. Thought, mad, absolutely mad what's gone on. But there you go. You just got to read, and there is genuinely so much ignorance around, and I classify myself in that, but weird, very strange.
Yeah, and it is very much it's a learning journey, isn't it, for each person, when they realise how little they actually know or understand, and being exposed to having a little bit of history, looking into what's happened, looking at the impacts. This is super important, because for you, in the context, whatever context you work, you're going to have clients that have a lot of background and history that impacts them. So understanding history, but also understanding how little is known or is part of the normal everyday in politics, in economics, in social structures. How does that impact people? So it's good that we're doing units like this, but it is definitely a shame that it isn't much more common in early schooling. there's more. I would say there's definitely more than there used to be, but nowhere near enough for people to really have a good understanding.
Well, you look at the ignorance. If I think about the presentations that I do, I was down in Sydney the other week, and I was presenting to a group of healthcare and aged care and NDI service providers, and a lot of those come from, or work with First Nations people, and I could imagine it would have been very simple for me to put my foot in it and appear ignorant, and I'm a salesperson. So whether that's good or bad, I'm kind of moving on from that a little bit, that thinking. But it's an interesting, see that then, got my tea. See that? Got tea. But it's it's that point that you're meeting people and diverse people, and you can only imagine they just look at it and go, "Oh, you poor fool." So it's interesting, but you just don't know that. You don't know what you don't know. And I think, it's almost, it should be like maths and English. And I also think community services should be like maths and English as well. It should be one of those core subjects, but it's not. It's just dropped. It's very strange.
Yeah. And a lot of the units in community services from 3 to 4 to even in the diploma, they just keep going back to diversity, and they'll come back to communication. A lot of it is about having that ability to reflect and to look internally at our own knowledge and understanding and our own biases, so that we really understand ourselves before we work with others, and make sure that we really have a good grounding of our self, our knowledge, our experiences and our values, and how they impact how we work with people.
And that reflection as well, taking a reflection on yourself and your own bias, that was really powerful doing that. You think about it's like, I really want to type that because it's true. And then you had to put it in there and go, that's a ridiculous bias, but I think unless you reflect on your own bias, and I'm actually starting to see this now across, sexuality, gender, all of the diversities, where people are, spruiking opinions. It's like, it's coming absolutely from a place of ignorance. No two ways about it. You're just not thinking. Yeah. And the thing is, I always stay away from arguments, and I always stay away from online because it's nonsense, but it's absolute ignorance it's coming from. It's amazing. You can't see it, but you want to say.
Ignorance and fear of the unknown.
Yes. They say the hardest thing about succeeding is accepting your failures. We're very scared of that. Even today, we've got people that are making money out of accepting our history. It's humankind, for the good and for the bad. Hopefully there'll be more good than bad.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so moving on a little bit, the totem. It is also about the land that you're on. So another thing that is interesting, if you have a look at your land, and what is the identified totems for where you are. So where I am, what we're still looking at is the dolphin, and my grandson is a Dungari boy born on Biripi land with a dolphin as his totem. So it's really nice to know sometimes that background and that understanding that we have of our beginnings. Did anyone find their totem?
Water lily.
Sorry, Tony?
Water lilies.
A water lily. Nice.
Mine's
No,
an
that's
eagle.
the same I found there.
What's yours, Abby?
An eagle.
An
It
eagle.
says.
Nice.
Yeah.
Diana, have you managed to be able to find one for your area?
Yeah, the goanna.
Goanna too. Kylie, did you?
Cassowary up here.
Ah, nice. And Sally, have you found yours?
Nope, I am currently looking.
Sometimes it's a little bit challenging. There's
Yeah.
usually more than one, but
I've got 6 of them.
Well, nope, that's not right.
So where I am, because I'm on the coast, the majority of mine are actually
Okay,
water-based.
Western.
Yeah, it looks like the goanna
Mm-hmm.
or the witchy grub, depending on which one you read.
Yeah, and that's it. You know, sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to work out because it's a little bit. Some of the information is a bit conflicting.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. All right. And
Okay.
you found it,
got-
Tony?
Yeah, but I've got 6 of them. I've got the gecko, kangaroo, honey hunt, yarn hawk. I've got 6 of them. I'm trying to get one close where I live, but it won't tell me that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, and again, it helps you have a little bit more of an understanding of the local groups and a little bit more awareness of the land that you're on and what's related to the land and the people that you're working with. So with that spiritual connection to land Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have, it's about living both in the physical and the spiritual. And that connection is really important. So you will hear some of your clients talking about going back to country if they're not living on the land that they are from. There is definitely some rules around being on country. So when Carl was talking about the acknowledgement to country or the welcome to country, for Reconciliation Week, so that was 2 weeks ago, we had a gentleman come in from one of the local community services organisations and have a chat to us. And he said that he's working on Biripi land, but that's not his country. So if he was asked to do a welcome to country, he actually would have to ask for permission to do that. So there are rules that we don't know a lot about sometimes, and it's about, you know, being open to asking your clients what they need, what supports, what connections they may have to country, and that's really important. Just breaking it down to that initial engagement that we have with our clients, thinking about how we develop that therapeutic relationship. What do you think might be one of the important things to kind of talk about or share or discuss with your client?
Certainly done.
That's all right. I was just asking if you're trying to get a relationship with an Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander, or you've just first met them and you're going to be working with them. having this little bit of background now, what do you think would be important? How do you think that relationship might be helped when you work with them?
You could ask them if they want a liaison person with them to support them.
Yeah.
Could find out where they're from and find out what their traditions and etc. are.
Yeah. So just as simple as asking, you know, were you born on this land? And that would, you know, what do you think that would make them feel? Or think?
Their connection to their connection to home, their connection to country.
Yeah. It would give you an immediate sense of how they feel and where they are. Potentially how many relatives, how many supports may be around, whether there's potential that they may actually not stay in your service area because they may be going back to country. So that kind of information, it's twofold. It helps to develop, because if someone asks me, you know, am I from this land, and asks me and is curious, then to me, it's someone that's demonstrating an interest. And that's important. And then it gives you a bit more of an understanding about them. And the sooner that you can do that, the better that relationship starts to develop for you. The notion that they are from the land and belong to the land, and that the land can provide and support them with everything, is a really important concept. And I don't think Westerners kind of get that concept so well. So it is very much a different way of thinking and understanding. And so there we do have to come with that open mind when we're working with people. All right, so there is a little video I want to show you, but what we'll do is we'll go and have a break now for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and watch the video.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, let me stop it. Okay, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it sounded very peaceful, their way of life, and I think if everyone lived like that, the world would be a better place.
I agree, Abby. Definitely agree with that.
They never had cancer.
Sounded really nice. I enjoyed watching that.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of research looking, and that gentleman has done a lot of speaking engagements, and like you can tell, he just would be a really nice person to listen to, and those stories that he would have. Yeah, nice. Okay, so let's pop back to yeah. Okay, so we're going to have a look at this one. Okay, so and from the video, you can see that point is being reinforced, isn't it? That country is very much part of and very central to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, and having that acknowledgement, what it means, is important when we're working with our clients and trying to get some kind of understanding of, you know, what they need when we're working with them. And that's why you'll see a lot of the programs, particularly for youth, but those support programs very often have elements of being outside, being part of the environment and activities that are based on that, because we're trying to ensure that that connection is supported. So tell me what your understanding of kinship is.
Family.
Family. And when we say family, our mental picture.
In First Nations, it can also be clan. There's a family, but there's also a deep kinship of clan and tribes, and something we Western people have a lot of trouble understanding.
So that extended group.
Yes.
And that connection, yeah. And sometimes our insular view of what a nuclear family is still present for people. When we look at some of those inherent biases or our own experiences are, that may be, you know, what we typically think and see is normal. Even outside of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander populations, we need to think about, well, what does kinship and family mean for people? And it comes in lots of different frames and different ways of working. So we really need to, you know, have that internal view of those links and what they mean to people. Really important. So you can get more information on that if you read up or refer to the Northern Land Council /kinship. There's information there, and it will provide you with a little bit more information for your assessments. So those groups do develop differently, and we're thinking about, you know, if you think geography and location, then obviously they will be different. It will look slightly different depending on where you are and how they're made up. So again, it's just trying to emphasize that we're not stereotyping even a group. We need to be really mindful of the diversity within that. Hoping that I don't lose connection. Okay. All right, there's another little video, so we'll just pop that on.
I hadn't really considered that, like, it makes sense, like, if you look at Europe, like, there's so many different cultures and everything within Europe. And then looking at Australia, how large that is, it's the same kind of thing with different regions and having different things within their culture. Yeah, I didn't really realize that, to be honest, but it makes total sense. Yeah. And that things would need to be, like, the policies and everything would need to be different for different areas and all that kind of thing. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. It gives a little bit more insight too. So say in community services, you're going to do a lot of work with local groups. So having a bit more of an understanding that, like, you can't just approach one group and not know, you know, who all the people are and the connections and whether it's matrilineal or patrilineal in that area, because it may mean that your programs, the work that you're trying to do, might just not succeed because of that little bit of lack of understanding.
It can even, sometimes you can offend people. Sometimes by not knowing enough and not knowing to say, I don't know, you can offend people. I've seen that happen before.
And it's really important, isn't it, to actually be quite open and say, look, I don't understand. I'm not sure. Am I doing the right thing? What would you prefer? Rather than sort of jumping straight in and making all these assumptions of how things should work. And so it just gives us a bit more of an understanding of that kinship. I'm sorry, let me just go back. There was just making sure that there were no more references to link you to. So we're looking at that, the marriage and who people can marry and how much that connection was occurring at that time. Do you think, and this is just purely speculation from my perspective, do you think it is as strong as it used to be?
No, but after all we've done, they're not doing too bad. Look at Africa, Same thing happened. We put people all over the place and look at it. First National pretty strong. It just, we have to face up to what happened.
So we've really disrupted a lot of those networks and links, haven't we? Those kinship groups and the clans have been completely disrupted. And it is really important that we do recognise both that they historically they were there, but being really sensitive about people that we're working with now and the impact that might have on them. And making sure that, that carries over into the way we work, and we're looking at that real understanding of cultural safety that we need to have when we're working with people. Oh, goodness. Having a hard time today. All right. I'm not going to play this video, but there is another video there for you when we send out the link. Just again, it's a good little video talking about the kinship and the notion of Aboriginal culture and that connection, about setting up identity and understanding your own belongings, establishing those links with community. Now, just saying those words, if you think about that disruption, that lack of identity, that lack of strong connection, what's the impact on people in your services?
Isolation, loneliness, mental health, etc., 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 etc.
So all of those things that your clients are walking in with can be directly as an impact of that history that they've gone through. And it's generational history. So whilst people will, and you will hear people say it happened previously, it didn't happen to them, you have to think about the actual impact as it goes through families and that loss of identity and connection. It's quite an important factor to remember. By having the kinship and the kinship groups, it encourages the individuals to have a stronger understanding of relationships and concepts of family and how people work together. It ties communities together, and it supports that whole community group. So, that move, and I can't tell you when it started, but the development of kinship care when we're looking at foster care. Imperfect. I would not say that we've got it completely right, but there's a reason kinship care is an important factor that we need to consider, and we need to make happen, is because of this ability to have those groups connect and to have that family identity and that community identity continue to be really, really strong.
Donna, I didn't really understand. I saw this video, but I didn't really understand the fact, you know, they can have more than one mum and more than one dad. So I kind of understood the principle of aunties and uncles, but there was a principle of having more than one mum, more than one dad.
Mm.
I don't quite know. Maybe I'll do some. You don't need to play the video. Maybe I'll do some more digging on that, but I didn't. It's not something I understood.
Yeah. Or
I'll do some
maybe
more digging on that.
do some more digging, and maybe the next video, this video might also talk about that a little bit more. And there's, let me just see if I can. No, I can't do a copy. When you get the video, you get a download of the PowerPoint as well?
You can do, yeah. In the portal, you can download it, yeah.
Yeah. And do you get the notes section of those PowerPoints, or do you just get the PowerPoint slides?
I don't know. Can't remember. Tony, don't know. Present the notes. I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's a PowerPoint. Yeah, you will do. Stop PPT. It isn't PDF'd.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah,
so
you should do.
Just under this slide, there's a link, and it's a blog on the role of kinship in Aboriginal culture. So you might find a little bit more on that topic that you're asking about in there. Yeah. All right. And spirituality and beliefs. So we're looking at those creation stories, which is really really interesting. And again, one of those things that I don't think we know a lot or enough about. We've got this vague understanding of what dreaming is. And I think it would be really, really good if we learnt more in school, but all of us, I feel like it would be really kind of beneficial.
Donna, and it's quite an important section for me. This as you can tell, normally I'm not switched on at all. I'm usually asleep. But there's a lot of, in Optus, as an example, we have an Indigenous group. You could hear my eye rolling then. You could literally hear my eyes rolling. And we do training on this, by the way. We train on it. But, you know, I think, you know, the thing, and you were just talking about, you know, the education of, but there's nothing ever tracked. There's nothing ever, you're not given those tasks to reflect upon yourself and how you're going to be a better an ally of this or whatever. And it's, you know, one of the things, been in a big corporate world, you know, it's really disappointing that a fortune is spent on the inclusive nature of things. And I can probably raise it, and I may just raise it, but, you know, they've got a specialist group for it as well. But it just feels like it's a massive tick box exercise. It really does.
And I would absolutely agree with you. Like I said, I've worked in health, and I can tell you that I have also participated in years and years of mandatory training that literally does feel like a ticker box. So, like, I talk about education, and I think it's important, but I think and really related back to your comment, when people have an interest and a drive to understand a bit more, then we're more receptive and we take it on a little bit better, or a lot better, because it means something at the time, and it means that we've got that interest and want to learn. Whereas, you know, organisations absolutely, you know, as part of making sure culture is good, making sure they're doing the right thing, trying to be culturally appropriate and provide a culturally safe environment, don't really hit the mark.
But I think that a lot of it comes, so I'm monopolizing at the moment, but a lot of it comes from, you know, certainly in I suppose in our world is you do work with federal government, and federal government dictates that you're required to, you know, have certain quotas of certain things. You have to have tick boxes around. You have to have this policy. You have to have that policy, and you have to show that policy when you know, when you bid and tender for work within federal government. But then you've got federal government who are doing exactly the same tick box exercise. You know, so it's the policing the police. It's like, right, we've done that tick box exercise to hit your tick box exercise because you're doing exactly the same thing, but you're at the apex of the tree. Oh, that's not a thing, but you're at the top of the apex. And it's like, you know, so even at that point, they're going to go, well, actually, we want to see a little bit more there. So I think it's at the very top coming down, and it's a problem.
And does it change anything?
No, well, not certainly not from what I'm seeing. You know, I think there's, you know, there's a few people of interest, but absolutely not. It really doesn't, and it becomes mandatory. You've got to do your training to get your performance review. That's probably the majority of the reason that people actually do it, is because you've got to do it because you don't get your PDR rating, which is a bit shitty as well.
You had something, Kylie?
Well, when you actually move into the community sector, a whole new world will open for you. That's what I've found just with my experience. And like Far North Queensland, we have a lot of community.
Oh, that's a shame. You've cut out, Kylie.
Hello.
And I often will sit there and just ask questions, even with our Indigenous clients. When I'm talking, I will often just say, I don't want to be disrespectful, but can I ask this question? And you'll find a lot of Indigenous folk will gladly embrace the fact that you're wanting to know more about their culture, more about their land, more about everything about them. I've not come across one person that has said, no, you Migaloo, I don't need to explain anything to you, or be disrespectful. It's from ancestors that has done it. It has been so welcoming. So the more, when you get into that space, there's so many opportunities to learn more and to embrace the culture and to be so open about it. So I'm just speaking from my experience. I've just learnt so much over the last 7 years.
And I would agree with you there, Kylie. Like I said, working in health, I've done the programs, and you know, it made no huge impact. Then I moved into a specific program working with people, much more immersed in people and their lifestyle and their family and their communities. And so that change occurs. And then a move into community itself and community work, the dynamic is so much different, and you have much more opportunity to really develop a relationship with people and ask those questions and have that better understanding.
It's not the First Nation people that are ashamed of the past. It's the white Australian or migrant. You know, Carl is talking about ticking the boxes. I know a bit about that. And you tick the boxes, you get educated, but at the same time, those boxes are making sure you don't go out of the normal society. Okay? I mean, have you ever tried to talk to a white Australian about the wars, the trouble wars we had in us? We've had more people killed in Australia than in USA. Okay? You try to tell that. We've got politicians today who are in parliament that made the fortune out of stealing land. So, you know, the boxes are there to educate you, but they're there to remind you, stay in the box. And that's part of the problem.
And then the beauty of community services is that we're asking you to absolutely spread out.
Yes, yes.
Look internally, but spread out and develop those relationships, because that's the only way we really work well with people. You understand yourself and you understand them, their needs, their experiences, the things that impacts on them. And by knowing that, we're then able to support people and help them far more than that being at a distance and not really understanding or knowing a person. Nice. I might not do it today, but maybe next week. What we'll look at is how do we make a workplace culturally safe, and how do we develop cultural competence in ourselves? Because it's a bit more of a topic. So just moving back to our slides, just making sure that we've got that understanding of the origin story, basically. Again, I think in your, I don't know, Carl, you probably had a quick look more than anyone else at what's coming up in that assessment. But I think there would be some questions on spirituality and the dreaming in those questions in that research. So you'll be having a bit of a look at that if you've never had a look previously. And then again, we're looking at Creative Spirits information website. So this is where this information is coming from, just to give you a little bit more of an understanding. But we're going back to that land and that connection to land. And I think like we hear it, but I really don't think we understand it. If that's not your experience, if that's not your background, it's one of those things where we have to listen and try and understand where people are coming from and the impact to them. And this one's from Australians Together, this information, and it's just looking about that totem connection as well, so that animalistic world. And when we think about, I don't know if you've heard of many of those Dreamtime stories, but they'll often talk about animals as part of that story as well. When you read that slide, what does that bring to mind for you? Does it bring to mind any other culture or religion?
I'm sorry, Donna.
Does it remind you of any other cultures or religion, the spirituality, that concept?
Buddhism?
Well, they are very different. I've actually gone through this kind of discussion. They're very different in one big term. Most cults of religion that we know are based on power and money, or power, energy. Money is man-made energy. That's what money is. It's a copy of universal energy. On the other hand, the First Nation, along to a few other natives in the world, was totally the opposite. They were based on splitting power. There was a responsible person. was not a leader. Most Aboriginal cultures did not have leaders. They had elders. They had people that are responsible. They don't have people that give orders. And so it's a big difference. Western spirituality and religion, most of them are based on power. That's all it's about. Within native ones are based on the opposite. Is power belongs to everyone. There's one person that's responsible. And now I'll shut up again.
And someone else had a comment? Was it you, Kylie or Sally? You were going to say something?
As it reminds me a bit of Buddhism.
I'm not really well versed in different religions, but that came to mind when I saw that one as well, sort of that that reincarnation kind of thought came to me. And this is not something I have been looking at previously, the wheel. So I think it's for us more process-driven people, it gives us a little bit more of an idea of where that sits and how these concepts fit in for people that have this really strong connection to the land as well as to their kinship and members and clans.
The big difference between First Nation, sorry, Donna, the big difference, like I said, I've done a bit of spiritual. The big difference between First Nations and Buddhism, while there's some similarities, there's one huge difference. Buddhism believes in karma. I believe in Buddhism myself, but that believes in karma. First Nations, karma is looking after the land. That's the karma. That's why land is so important to them. Like to a Buddhist, karma is important because that will determine your next life. To a First Nation, the way they live the land is important because that will determine their next life.
Yeah.
So that's a big difference to me between Buddhism and First Nation.
Yeah. So it's a nice way of thinking of it. All right. And so still looking at the dreaming, we're looking at that ongoing link between ancestors, Aboriginal people, animals and nature. So our connection to that land, the cyclic nature. So again, a little bit back to the kind of reflection of how people live and what they're supposed to be doing for each other and for the land. And when we're looking at the dreaming now, as it relates to people's lives, it's taken on a bit of a different form in some respects, but mostly we're looking at art as a way of that shared connection. Is quite a strong shared connection that we would look at. And in your module, I think it's on around page 22 and then page 75, they're looking at dreaming activities occurring at the beginning of the world and the past, and the sense that they're still part of the present. That's on the slide. I haven't looked at those pages yet, so I'm assuming that they are going to talk about a few bits and pieces in your guide, but definitely you'll need to research a little bit more. So we're talking about the Dreamtime being that beginning, that creation story, and those ancestors shaping the world. So I some vague memories of some of the Dreamtime stories about the animals, the way they live, the way they die, sitting down, and then that's the shape of the mountains and things like that. So, you know, there's some vague understanding that I have, but I would say it's just not enough to be confident, to have conversations with people and understand enough about it. So this is definitely things that, like, as I look through some of the units, I think I need to do a little bit more research myself to, you know, be a little bit more knowledgeable about what occurred and those origin stories that people have and that they're sharing across the families. Has anyone been to any of the Dreamtime presentations? Because I know there have been a few different ones.
No.
Has anyone been to Uluru and the...
Not yet. Next year.
Yeah. Okay, I saw it on TV. There's this really, really great event at Uluru. They've got drones, and they're working with the local groups, and they're actually talking about this Dreamtime story. And it's just, you've got the backdrop of Uluru, you've got the lights, you've got the sunset. It just looked fantastic. So I believe that's now on my bucket list as well. I have been to Uluru, but didn't get to see that. So yeah, there's some really fantastic stuff out there. And when you're looking at some of that ecotourism stuff, there's certainly a bit more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander led activities that really, you know, are providing much more information for everybody to understand and learn a bit more about some of these origin stories, which is really fantastic, I think. It has purpose. So we're looking at the setting those rules for relationships. A lot of it was around the law, but also around how they worked the land as well. So there was purpose to these stories, which is really impactful when we listen, because it's, you know, how they worked and what happened and how they cared for the land so successfully, and yet we can't do some of what they were doing back in that day. So I think that's an interesting thing. They've also, one of the things, again, I saw a TV program, just diverging off the dreaming, but there was, they'd found this irrigation channel that had been built somewhere central New South Wales, I think, that allowed them to have water and to grow crops and things like that. So there's an assumption that they were very much living off the land, hunting and gathering, but there was that farming and some of those processes were occurring at the same time. So that's an interesting thing, that we're still finding some of this stuff. And that happened in the fires, the big fires a couple of years ago, where once that land had been burnt, they actually found all of this stuff out there. All right, let me just see. Stop that sharing for a second. See if this is the really long slide. Yeah, so let me have a look. What's the time? Okay, we might have 10 minutes, have a break, and then we'll come back.
Okay, thank you.
So there's a video, a 10-minute video. Have a look at that and answer some of those questions for yourself once you watch the 10-minute video at the end of the PowerPoint. And then as a recommendation, there is a movie on SBS on demand if you're interested in watching that.
You know what, Donna, one of the things I got thinking about was colour of people's skin. That was one of the things that really hit me with doing this module is, you know, why there's, and the girl did amazing at State of Origin. I think it was Origin, the young girl, 22-year-old, and white skin. And I didn't think about it at all. The origins of, you know, when people have different skin tones, and then you just started thinking, well, why have they got different skin tones? What happened later 18th, you know, 19th century into the stolen generations? And, you know, it just got you thinking. Where you thought, you know, when I mentioned ignorance before, you know, I thought, geez, and you could have turned around and asked a question. You could have been dull enough to ask, but why aren't you dark skinned? You know, and there's those type of things where you think, oh, you could have absolutely, and to be fair, thank God I've not had much involvement at this stage, because the amount of feet in mouths I would have done would have been just ridiculous. But again, no one ever teaches that or tells you that, or it never comes out in polite conversation. And I think that was one of the things that really stood out for me as you're going through this module in particular, the amounts of little red flags that they need to mark up and go, think about this before you speak, or think about that before you speak. And there was quite a few in this section, actually. So it feels like I've done it all, but I haven't. I've still got two assessments left, but I found that really interesting, that one.
It is, isn't it? Like you, and it's that when they talk about unconscious bias.
Yeah.
Until you do that little bit of inner search but outer research, it's kind of like you just don't realize what thoughts, what processes might be happening there that might actually have an impact on your judgment when you're working with people. Because it's those little things that you know, that people don't live the way we do and don't act the way we do.
Sorry, we've got a bit of a bust outside. Our cat's fighting with a black cat. So George goes mad and they're just out there shouting. Sorry, apologies.
Yeah, blame the cat. I've heard it all before.
The dog gets really worried for the cat. The dog hates the cat, but it's his cat. No one else can beat the cat up apart from him. So the cat's got to come back in now. So there you go. But I said about writing it down as well, that bias, when you had to write it down, that's quite confronting, because you have to think about it and you have to make a note and go, Jesus, really?
Yeah. And well, I did diversity with the other group, and this is one of the concepts and discussions that we had. And I just said, I'll just give you just a brief kind of look at my bias. And I grew up in a town in mid-north coast of New South Wales, very small, less than 2,000 people. Went to uni, went to Sydney to work, have been overseas, so worked in southwestern Sydney where there were quite a number of different population groups that I was working with and supporting. Started training, came to Port Macquarie, and in my class I had a person that had come from Sri Lanka, I think it was, and she had quite broken English. And to do support worker care, you need to be able to communicate, and this was for aged care facility, you need to be able to communicate with aged care clients. And my concern was that her accent, her language was not at a good enough level for English information to be transferred, or for her to do handover, or for her to communicate with people that are hard of hearing, vision issues, or have dementia. So, you know, regardless, like you add those complexities and it's challenging. And I got one of her first assessments back and read it and thought, oh my God, I had been so focused on her language that there was this unconscious process of me thinking she didn't understand a lot of what was happening. But the assessment that I got back was like well above the Certificate 3 level that was required for the work that she was about to do. Didn't negate that like language and accent was still going to be a problem in the workplace, but I'd actually had this unconscious bias about her English capacity or her knowledge capacity purely from her accent and her language. And that's after years of working with people with accents and different languages and different backgrounds. And so, you know, we carry these things around for various reasons, experience, lack of understanding. And, you know, we don't realize it sometimes until it's actually right in our face that some of these things are actually a bias that we have and maybe a stereotype that we've just absorbed.
It's easy. It's much easier when we just have another view. But like someone said, until you realize you know nothing, you're never going to know anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like these units are good for that. They're good for prompting us to have that look.